tool in the hyperhash framework which kind of helps us handle, not handle, I would say at least try to keep the possibility of Cobra effect and do that. Can you recall what that tool would be?
Kumaran, is it CQA?
Yeah, perfect. Yes, CQS, right? So basically, I think we don't know, right? As Deepak is telling, we don't know whether it's a good effect or a bad effect. But the moment we run, he'll take across a problem, instead of kind of going into a solution immediately, right? We kind of do CQAs to understand more about what's happening. And the other thing which could probably help is, Deepak would agree, I think, is that instead of going for a full-fledged solution, do a small MVP, experiment what effect it is producing, observe it before making that big bang change, right? Put that small thing out, check what is the impact on that. So probably like Ram in your case, right? Introduce that process for just one small team. See the effects of that happening. Is it helping them? Is it slowing down? What is happening before doing in zooming out to the entire org? That could be one way, right? See, because we don't know whether that will help or not. So even if I tell that,
Right.
Making process change is bad, as Deepak is telling, it might lead us in the wrong direction. So the best thing would be is do a CQA, understand what it is, try it within a small place, experiment, do an MVP, collect data for that, and then probably think, do I need to roll it out or?
Yeah, obviously, but that will involve some extra effort, from management side, and
Correct.
so maybe they are looking for easy solutions, and instead of doing all these MVP to really address the issue, they have an already established solution available in their books. They simply pull it and apply it.
Actually, it's kind of interesting. I just read a blog by a friend of mine. I had actually shared it on my Facebook. It was by a person called Jeff, who is one of the founders of Scrum. He actually says if you have a waterfall management following an agile thing, that company is best. In lot of cases, we have a waterfall management trying to use a agile process. And the second thing he says is we don't have a MVP bureaucracy. We need to have an MVP bureaucracy, which means try something small and then figure it out. Right? I think it again goes back to our pet topic, Deepak, fake and real agile, right? I think
Right.
all these things, that's the beauty of architecture. I think one of the things, if agile practices is done in its true spirit, right, with trying out MVPs and using an MVP to understand the problem itself, because I don't think humanly we can see the different facets. So MVP itself is a good, interestingly, I think Vimal, Venkat and Ram, right? MVP itself is a CQA tool if you look at it. It helps you reveal bottom of the iceberg signals, right? So once you put an MVP, the results of that MVP gives you the problems within the system. So you can actually, so that's where the fractal thing becomes. So MVP itself is a CQA tool if you look at it. It is only thing is, instead of asking a single person, we are asking an entire group of people or the audience itself. So great. Any other closing thoughts?
My suggestion is to not to trust any particular method. This is a sort of maybe it is part of your fractals, is to not to trust a method to such an extent that you believe that the Cobra effect will always be eliminated. Right.
Okay.
So don't. My sort of conclusion is, look for Cobra, use the Cobra effect to your advantage, because it will always be there. You cannot. I think you can never eliminate it, because even MVP can create its own Cobra effects, right?
Correct.
So that's the don't take that as a gospel that if I apply this method, the Cobra effect will never come. So I think the message there is to be aware of it, and use it to your advantage, right?
That's a good point. I think let's not give a negative connotation to it or judgment. It's an effect that happens.
Yes.
It can harm you or help you. So
Yes.
how can we use it to help us? That's the good point. Others?
Yeah, yes. Deepak said it cannot be avoidable. Yeah, one point he has rightly mentioned that how we can use the Cobra effect for advantages. No, actually, it is the Cobra effect will keep us, like informed, like keep us, keep us alert, so that like everything, no, we cannot take it as a granted. So like we should be like ready for anything, so that whenever something has happened, then we are ready to change and ready to like get have I mean find out the problem. So
Super point.
Let me add a physical anecdote to all these things, because I live in an area where there are actually physically there are cobras here, right? So and there have been at least within the compound of my house, I have had at least 4 or 5 times snake catcher come in and take away the snake, right? Fortunately, cobra never came in. There are other kinds of snakes which come in, right? And so we have never actually ever killed the snake. But now, because of all the snakes around, we are always very careful of how we go outside.
Okay.
Right? So
Okay.
we are always aware of that. You know what not to touch, or where not to step in without making some noise, right? And usually, fact is that snakes are trying to avoid you as much as you are trying to avoid them. So
That's true.
Right. So if you can avoid getting into the way of the snake, it should be all okay.
So, funnily, it's kind of the Cobra effect helps us become more mindful.
Exactly. It's more mindful. So whenever we go walking out, we are always aware that snakes are around. We have to be careful. That's all.
That's a good point. I think that's a good analogy of what Venkat was trying to tell. Ram, Vimal?
Yeah, so basically that awareness, what just Deepak mentioned, and the inquisitiveness to learn out of, what a Cobra effect that we have just encountered, I think that should help in terms of, coming out of this problem altogether. And it will be a, ongoing activity. It's not just we did something and there ends the matter. Okay, it's going to be an ongoing activity. So it basically we should have a learning mindset in order to make out of the best from this Cobra effect altogether.
Yeah, I agree. It's very impractical to say that anyone can design a perfect solution.
Correct.
Right? So we should, as others, Deepak, Ram, and Venkat, and Kumaran, you mentioned, so we should have an open mind to accept what is an effect coming out of it, and see how, if it's in the negative direction, how can we avoid it. And always these positive effects are always, those are like an inventions. What is possible, with what we have experienced in the past.
It was an interesting discussion, and a good twist Deepak came up with on telling that Cobra effect is also good for us. I like that a lot. And I think that's what is interesting, right? I keep on, and this is a mistake which happens, right? Our mindset. So till Deepak brought that point, I didn't think of it that way. Even though I talk about architecture, when is good, bad, and when is bad, good, right? It didn't quite strike me till he taught. So architecture thinking is something that will go on forever. Thanks all for joining.